Thank you so much, Phil. Hi, my name's Elizabeth. I'm an alcoholic from Louisville, Kentucky, your neighboring state, neighboring to Tennessee. Um, I am really grateful to be here tonight, and I've loved the talk before the meeting was cracking me up. I just love alcoholics. We're just such a collection of people. It's just all kinds, and what a great thing to be a part of. I am continually amazed at the places that AA has taken me to, especially the last year. I mean, that's just amazing. So I feel really lucky because I got sober young and I fell in love with AA right away. And I want to say to any newcomers, I'm here to share my experience and my experience, strength, and hope. And if anything I say is different than something your sponsor said to you, your sponsor is correct. I took that from another speaker. This is just my experience, and this is how I got and stayed sober. I believe I was born with a genetic predisposition to something. I mean, I know that. So I only drank 6 years of my life, but I feel like I've always been looking for some way to feel okay in my own skin. I remember being very, very young. I got sober when I was 21, January 3rd, 1988. That was 33 years ago. I'm 54 years old. I haven't had to drink or take any drugs in that time. But I remember being as young as preschool and thinking about, there was always some way for me to escape mentally. I would get a crush on a boy, and I would imagine he liked me back. Or when I was young, I ate I would eat so many Oreo cookies, my mom stopped buying them. But I always felt apart from, I felt kind of lonely, even when lots of people were around. I was a late bloomer. I looked like I was 12 till I was 21, and I was the girl at camp that didn't have the bra. I got picked on in middle school. I would cry all the time at school, and I just, boy, was I ripe for alcohol by the time it came into my life. I was so ready for that. But I just felt like other people had something I didn't have. Like they always, like we moved around a lot. My stepfather was a real estate developer, so he'd build a house and we'd move into it. And that often meant going to different schools. And I remember every time I would go to a new school, I'd think, this time I'm going to figure out how to be popular and liked, and this time I'm going to be able to do it. And every time I wouldn't do it. I would be the shy, mousy one that would, I read a lot of books. I got great grades. I could count on that. That was something that I could have pride in, was my smarts. My dad got almost a perfect score on the college entrance exam, the SAT. And people would always say, you're just like your dad. So I had a lot of pride in that. I was the oldest in my family, and I was the oldest in my extended family. And I was often told, you could be the first woman board member of the family business. And so I was, set up to succeed, right? And yet inside I felt really just like my sister was popular. She was pretty. She had more friends. She seemed to be able to get along with everybody. I was also the one that talked back in my family, so I would get in a lot of trouble. And she was the kind that would, and she was doing all the same stuff as me, but she wasn't getting in trouble. She always found a way to never get in trouble. I mean, she would literally sneak into our parents' room and steal $100 bills out of our stepfather's money clip and not get caught. I couldn't even do that. I was too scared. But the summer before I went to junior year in high school, my sister and her friends were getting together to drink beer and smoke marijuana, and I did it with them. And when I went back to school that year, I went to a private girls' school. All the popular girls gave me attention because they'd heard that I'd been partying with these guys, and they thought that was really cool. And I literally thought marijuana is part of my story, and I literally thought that it changed my life. And it did, alcohol and drugs. This is right around the same time I got a license and a car. We pretty much got what we wanted materially growing up. And it was freedom. getting in the car. I would sneak out in the middle of the night. My stepfather was a little older than my mom, and they would always go to bed early. So I would make noise at curfew time and then sneak back out a couple hours later, like every single night, and pick up a couple of my friends. We'd arrange it because we didn't have cell phones. We'd have to pre-arrange the meetups earlier in the day, and we'd go pick people up and drive all over the place. And that was my freedom. That was my identity I didn't have an identity before. I was, always felt left out, always felt apart from, always felt confused, lonely, and now all of a sudden I have power, I have freedom, I have, friends, I'm able to talk to people, it gave me everything I wanted. We hear this story a lot, and it was definitely true for me. And I've heard so many great things in the past year on Zoom, and one of my favorites is, and I don't know who said it, so you could be in this room for all I know. He said, first it was fun, then it was fun with problems, then it was just problems. And that's what happened for me. I went to, I got kicked out of the girls' school in Louisville for, my husband loves the story. I stole beer from this little grocery store. They had a walk-in refrigerator, and each morning I would go in there to get a tab, if you remember tab, and then they had beer on the other side, and I would sneak some into my book bag. And I'd normally, on the way back to school, I'd walk across the street to go to school. This was in the morning. I would drop off the beer into my car and then go into class. Well, one morning I was running late, and so I still had the beer in the book bag, and someone told on me. And I'd already done every other little thing to get me. The next thing I did, I'd get kicked out. So I got kicked out. And my mom, I was already causing trouble at home. This is all within a few months of me starting drinking and drugging, okay? My mom decided that I was too much trouble at home and I needed to be sent to boarding school. So then I get kicked out of school. So she needs to make sure they'll still take me. And I get sent up to boarding school near Chicago. It was north of Chicago in Lake Forest. And oh my gosh. So I quickly found the people that were doing drugs. Just, from day one, I found those people, and we were running out to the woods. It still blows my mind that did the teachers ever see us walking out to the woods and wonder what we were doing? Because, I would be suspect of that, but nobody ever said anything. And the next year, I conned my way into being able to take my car to school and then be able to use it every day, which you had to tell some lies to get that going. And my mom told me, if you take your car to school, you're going to get kicked out. And it only took a week. So I got kicked out of that school. They allowed me to come back to Louisville and take my exams through the mail. So I didn't get to go through graduation ceremonies. I didn't get to go to prom. And the way that I felt, I remember so well. I mean, my grandmother, everyone was so disappointed in me, being the oldest and just letting everybody down. And it was such a huge weight. She called me Elizabeth. She even stopped calling me Elizabeth. I used to go by Lisa as a child. And I just remember just that whole, wow. But I wasn't even anywhere near seeing, everyone around me was doing what I was doing. They just weren't getting caught. So I just thought I was unlucky. So my dad says, well, where my peers were going to all these Ivy League schools, he says, well, you've gotten kicked out of two schools. I'm only going to pay for you to go to University of Kentucky. And so I went there and proceeded to drink. I think my first semester, I was supposed to get 15 credit hours and I got 6. So we were off and running. It was, it was pretty bad. And for the next 3 years, I just kept, drinking. My behavior, I was doing things I was very ashamed of. And I got to the place where I would be walking to school and people would say hi to me and they'd know my name and I would just feel dread. What did they see? What do they know? What did I do? I blacked out all the time. I was a blackout drinker. I blacked out and drove my car frequently. I would call people the next day and say, did I drive home or did you drive me home? And I had this boyfriend the entire time. And we had an open relationship, which meant I dated others and he didn't. And by the time it was my senior year, I came home for Christmas break, and I just, I had committed to him and then cheated on him again. And I started talking to my dad. I said, I don't know what to do about this relationship. I don't know if I should stay with him or not. And he said, well, you're, at this point, he was almost a year sober in AA. And he said, you're the child of an alcoholic. Maybe you ought to try going to Al-Anon. You're the child of an alcoholic. You're going to have problems with relationships. Maybe you could go to Al-Anon. And so that day, or a couple of days later, I went to a New Year's Eve party and found out that some of my friends were already in AA. And they said, oh my gosh, we're going to be at the same church that night. You can come out with us after the meetings. And so that day, I was thinking about going to Al-Anon, and I wanted to get high, but I knew that I couldn't, because then I'd be high for Al-Anon, and I just knew somehow that was a bad idea. And that was the first time that I had any event where I would stop and think, oh, I can't do this for that. Because I was always, in my whole life, everything that I did, grandmother's Christmas Eve party, everything, I could be drunk or stoned, it didn't matter. But that night I sat there in that Al-Anon meeting, and I didn't hear a word they said. All I could think was, maybe I belong across the hall, because I thought about it all day. And this might be the mental obsession my dad told me about that I'd never stopped to think about before. And so I decided 2 days later was January 3rd, and I started going to this meeting. And it was a lot of people. I knew several people in there already. And it was a huge meeting, and it was so, it was just bright lights, fluorescent lighting, and you go around the room and say your name. And I remember it so well, just terrified, like my heart was just racing when it was almost my turn to say my name. And then people started to talk about how they felt and how they were scared and insecure. And I'd never heard people talk like that before in my life. I'd never, ever heard people talk about feelings. We did not talk about feelings in my family growing up. My mom was raised by a man who was on Omaha Beach in World War II and came home and beat his family. And she never got help for that. And you didn't cry. You didn't show. Crying was, you better have a reason, or I'll give you a reason. I mean, that was not okay in our family. And I was so hungry for that. So when I heard you all speak in what we call the language of the heart, and I felt that connection for the first time with other people, I mean, it makes me want to cry, like seeing what was on the other side of that fence, for the first time. I connected with it right away. And I started to make AA kind of my whole life. I was 21 years old, and I already had friends in here, so we just stuck together. I went back to UK for one more semester, and I found the other people that were in AA. It was a very small group. There were not very many people college age at that point in Lexington going to AA. But we just stuck together. We went to meetings every day. We went to coffee houses every night. And then when I came home that summer, I found this group of people that, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful I found them. Everyone was actually in therapy. Everyone was in ACOA therapy. So this was the fall of 88. And I got with this group where we maybe read the big book once, and then it was somebody's, photocopied step study from somebody's treatment center, who knows where it came from, but it had very little to do with the big book. And everyone was in therapy, and everyone was reading self-help books, and I did the same thing. And at about 14 years sober, or 14 months sober, I actually have a 14-year sober story and a 14 months sober. At 14 months sober, I guess they can call the pink cloud wore off, or whatever you want to call it. But I started to feel like a little kid, like a lost little kid, and I didn't know what was going on. And the people around me said, it's time for you to go to therapy. And I share that with you because when I think about the things I'm grateful for in recovery, they say that the two important components are, the spiritual aspect. It's the God, and then it's inventory. It's honesty. It's taking an honest appraisal of myself. I am very grateful that I did that work, because I think it helped me to be thorough and seeing what was driving me, because I didn't even know. One thing about growing up, and I didn't mention this, but my parents were alcoholic, and I had a bipolar stepdad. And so a lot of things went on in my family where it was like, we needed to act a certain way so we didn't upset my stepdad. Everything kind of revolved around him and not upsetting him. And so I would often be told that things were normal and okay when they actually weren't. And I don't think, as a parent, I know, we arrive in adulthood with, I'm not going to go into that, but I don't, I'm not trying to blame my parents, but there are things that I had inside me that I didn't know because no one ever told me. And when I got to be an adult and I was in therapy and I heard other people talking about things that happened to them, and then they would cry, it would trigger things in me. And I'm glad that I found out, because I had given my family, like, I thought I was from a normal family. I dismissed all these questions. Like I didn't even know I had the questions, but something inside me felt unloved. I just simply didn't get what I needed to feel loved. So I believe I was born with this chemical, predisposition towards alcoholism, which I've heard is, we slant things negatively as alcoholics. So someone can say to you, "Hey, how are you?" And you're like, "Why are you asking me that? Don't I look okay?" And then on top of it, have parents that don't know how to nurture. And then I'm taking it to the extreme. I'm set up to need to use something. So I feel like alcoholism is sort of like, you have a loaded gun and you don't know when you're going to pull the trigger. Because I know women that they didn't drink alcoholically till they were in their 40s, and some life event, set them on that path. And then they found out they were alcoholic once they started drinking and had the alcoholic response to the alcohol. But I did it from a young age. But I'm grateful for that knowledge that I got. And that's what it is. It's knowledge. I went on through my 20s and my life looked like a sober person's life. I was getting things now. And I got married and I had a career. I had a business. I had a pretty house. I had, a famous client. I got to do some pretty cool things with my work. I was on TV. I was in the paper. And it all looked great, and I thought I was doing the program. What I understood of the program, I thought I was doing it, and I thought I believed in a higher power. And I certainly knew how to do inventory. I read every book that you could read, pretty much. I read every self-help book. Boy, did I know, I could write you a book about everything. But by the time, somewhere between 11 and 14 years sober, I started to get away from, I got so busy with my life that I got away from the program. And life started to get harder. And my marriage started to fail. My business started to fail. And I look back at the decisions. I was running around trying to make everything work. I was working so hard and things weren't working. And once again, it was just like at the end of my drinking, I would ask, what's wrong with me? And why isn't this work? Why can't I figure this out? And all I had was me and my wits, and I didn't have anything else. And I got divorced and I got into a relationship with someone. It was toxic because I was in it. Okay. But also he was a verbal abuser, and he was an alcoholic. And he was so smart, and he would just have me so upside down with things that, and now I have self-esteem. I know how, I quote, deserve to be treated. And I know this isn't okay. And yet I kept going back to him. He would tell me everything I wanted to hear. I love you more than anyone ever, and all this stuff. And of course, deep down, I wanted to be needed. I had little idea at the beginning what was going on. But then by the end, I knew everything about what was going on, and yet I still kept going back. And I hit this place where I felt so, oh my God, my self-esteem was just so damaged, and I had let myself down so far, and I was just devastated that, over and over and over, I kept going back to this person, and they kept hurting me, and yet I kept letting it happen. And I was sitting in my car. I was 14 and a half years sober. And then I was sitting in my car at our AA club. And somehow I remembered Bill Wilson could not stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. And I knew everything about why I kept going back to this guy, the dynamics. I knew all the stuff from therapy and all the books, but I couldn't stop. And I felt like I was trying to use an arm I didn't have. I remember looking at my arm and I'm bawling. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is what powerless feels like. I just didn't get there with alcohol. I am an alcoholic, but I didn't get to that place with alcohol. I got there because of that relationship. And that weekend, this little girl asked me to sponsor her for some reason, who knows what in the world. And I knew that I couldn't say yes unless I had a sponsor. And at the time I didn't have one. So I decided I would go to this certain meeting where there were women, long-term sobriety, and then I was running late. I always ran late for years. I was known for it, trust me. And so I decided, okay, well, I'll go to this other meeting and I'll call women from the first meeting later in the week because I knew only one woman at this other meeting and I didn't like her. I wasn't going to ask her. So I went to this meeting and I walked in late, and the person at the podium was a woman I'd gotten sober with, someone I looked up to, someone who was in that tight-knit group of people doing self-help stuff. And she said, I was 15 years sober and didn't have a God of my understanding. And all of a sudden, everybody went blurry. And I was just like, oh my God. And that night, I got my sponsor that I still have today. And she said, we're going to read that big book. I'm like, I remember reading it, and it was a bunch of old guys that drank a lot more than I did. I don't know what in the world you think it's going to have to offer me now, right? And she took me through it, and she got me writing from the very first page. And she said, we're not going to look at just how you drank because, that was 14 years ago. We're going to look at how you thought and how you felt. And she had me write about the relationship too and how I tried to use it to make me okay. I tried to use it. She said, people get in here, they stop drinking, and then they run and they find the next thing that's going to make them whole. Anything but God. I'm going to put in front of it and try to make myself okay. I didn't know I was doing that. I just didn't know. I didn't know, I hadn't been taught the program. Thank God that I knew somehow it was the answer. I didn't know how it was the answer. And she had me do all this writing, and I got to the end of chapter 3, and I was miserable. And I said to her, how come I'm so miserable? And she said, because you need to have no place else to go but God. I was like, oh my gosh. And it says it on page 60. We had to be convinced that a life run on self-will could hardly be a success. Before I can even consider, why am I going to need a higher power? I'm my own power, right? I'm smart. I'm capable. I know how to do everything. It's all I've ever had. So now what? Okay, great. I have trust issues too. So how am I going to trust something I can't even see? And I wish I could tell you that, from that moment, I worked a perfect program, but I didn't. I went on and I made AA a Band-Aid for years. I only came back and was active in AA for as long as it took for me to feel good again. And then I went back and ran my own life. I will say I was very busy with 3 kids. One of them had special needs, and that is a hard life. And if you say all kids are hard, then you haven't had a kid like that. And I know women now that have children like that, and it's hard. It is very hard, and it's a hard life. And I never judge anybody. I don't know what it takes for any of you to get to another sober day. That's something else I've learned because I became a big book thumper. And if you weren't working the steps and in the book, then, I'd have an attitude about you. But I don't know. I've really learned a lot in the past year. There are so many different ways people are working the program, and I'm not God. I don't know what you need to do to get to another sober day. I don't know what journey you need to have. I don't know if you need to drink again to really get this thing for good. And one thing my sponsor, she taught me about sponsorship. She said, sponsor's role is to teach you the program and then to remind you to seek the spiritual solution to your problem. And that's it. It's not to tell you what to do, And I'm so grateful that she gave me that gift because over and over again, I probably wouldn't have listened to her anyway. I'm so hard-headed, if she tried to boss me too much, I probably wouldn't have listened. But I've learned more probably in the past year from going to meetings on Zoom than, I've just learned so much. I can't even believe it for one thing, I really did miss the point for a long time about what these steps are about. I realized that I was always surrendering to a better version of Elizabeth. I could talk a good game, but I wasn't doing it. I wasn't actually doing it. I wasn't helping newcomers. I wasn't sponsoring. I wasn't in a home group, and I wasn't in a service position at a home group. So how much of AA was I even in? I mean, I went to some meetings. I got real comfortable in my little retired women's meeting at 10 a.m., and there weren't any newcomers there. They weren't asking me. So, I've rested on my laurels. I heard there's in some part of the world, I think a laurel is a cactus. So if you rest on it, you're going to get poked or something. I heard that in a meeting. I thought it was pretty funny. But what amazes me now is I joined a home group out of California that is it's just a group within AA, like so many. There's a lot of different ones, kind of like Christian churches, right? There's a lot of different interpretations of the message out of the book. And this one is very focused on, what does my alcoholism look like today and the day that I'm in? How am I treating my disease today? And I want to tell you a story. So I got by with, raising my kids, and I didn't work, so I didn't have a lot of entanglements with other adults. And about 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago, we had a lot of changes in my family, and I always ran to AA when things got hard, and this was no different. My stepmother died. My stepmother of 38 years died, and my dad got remarried to someone within 8 months that he'd known her only 3 months, and she doesn't like us, and we stopped seeing my dad. I never thought this would happen. It broke my heart. It was huge for me, and because I was a daddy's girl, and we had gotten close as adults because we were both in AA. And I want to always respect my father and what he's doing. I can't, he's happy with her, and that's great. And he has to respect her and all that stuff. And it's just been a huge, pill to swallow for me, and something I've really had to work my program on harder than anything probably for a while, And I started going back to meetings. I knew, like, I was sitting there one day, and I was with my youngest child, and I couldn't enjoy the fact that I was with him. I mean, I was so not present with him because I was thinking about my dad, and I knew that means my AA program is really weak, and it was. And so I started going back to meetings, and starting to go back to meetings. So I meet this man. I think he's in here right now. So I meet my husband. And I was 28 years sober at the time, and he was actually just a few months back after a relapse. And we start having feelings for each other, and I call my sponsor, and I hadn't been working with her in a while because I just started going back to meetings, I call her up, and I said, well, she knows Rob, if you're in Louisville AA for long enough, you all end up knowing each other, and he'd been around since 1984, so I told her, and she kind of laughed and said, all right, well, come on over tomorrow. Let's make sure you're in the book. She didn't tell me not to date him, but she's come and let's make sure you're in the book. And she did. And I'm telling you how many times I want to complain about, I'm going to date this guy in his first year back and set him up to meet all my needs and then try to complain about it to my sponsor. Well, guess how many times she told me it was his fault? Like zero times. It was always my fault. And this is where I got to learn about what they call emotional sobriety. It's a really hot topic right now. There's a lot of meetings about emotional sobriety. Emotional sobriety. The places that I have to work my program the most and ask for God. Okay, I want to talk about the third step here in a minute. But, it's number one with my sponsees, because they ask me questions and I don't have the answers to them. So I got to pray and ask for the answer. 2, with AA service, because, oh my God, have you been in AA service with a home group? Just let's not even go there. And 3, my marriage. And the first thing that I found out was that for the 13 years before, since I'd been divorced and out of a relationship, and then until I get in the relationship with my husband, I'm the boss of 3 kids. I'm the boss. I'm the little queen of the kingdom over here, and everything I say goes, and so I get to be little Miss Bossy. My husband moves in, and I'm going to tell him which dish towel to use to dry his hands versus, wipe down the counters. Or no, we have rules about what we put on that counter. That's for papers, not food, and all this stuff. And about a month in to us being married, he comes and sits down in here and says, I don't even know where I'm allowed to sit in this house. And I was just like, oh my God, I didn't even know. I didn't know. I had no idea that my way of operating in this world was going to be so, was not going to be able to get along with another person. And of course, that's not how I want to be. So I start to work a program, and I start to do it actively 100% of the time because I want to stay married, partly because I want to stay married. And he and I have had, we have had our, we have not had the relationship where no one fights. In fact, we've had a lot of fighting, and we've separated and gotten back together. But I've learned more about, I'll tell you a story here in a minute. I missed the third step for a really long time. And whenever I'm asked to do a lead, like a shorter talk, I do it on the third step because I missed it for so long. The third step, when people say, oh, it's just a decision. And, you see somebody, someone's done their third step because they're right in their fourth step. I don't see it that way. To me, it's a very big shift in the way that I'm living my life. It is 100%. I am at a crossroads, and I'm walking on a new road now. And I'm not walking on the old road. I'm not patching up the old road. I'm not trying to improve and try to be a better person and living by a mere code of morals or whatever the heck they say in the book. I am walking on a new path now. And I have a new my sponsor makes all of us read 60 to 63 every day for a week and write about how we're doing that everywhere in our lives before we take our third step prayer. And 60 to 63, if you don't know, I could probably recite it by heart, is where it talks about, I'm supposed to be an actor in the big show of life, but I think I'm the director. I want to tell everybody what to do. I'm going to tell myself what to do. I'm going to tell Phil what to do. I'm going to tell Sue what to do. And I think I know what you all need to do. And I think I know what everyone needs to do and how it needs to be. And what I have learned is that my entire life, without a higher power, I live from the outside in. I need to make my life the way I think it needs to be so I can be okay. I need to make you treat me the way I think you need to treat me so I can be okay. I'm going to create this set of rules and that set of rules. I'm going to have a rule for everything, and I'm going to live by it. I'm going to try because that's what I need to be okay. That's my security. And here's an original quote. That is like living in a house of cards, and you can live in a house of cards as long as the wind doesn't blow. And I did for a long time. It doesn't work. And it's not why I'm here. I've been given a new purpose in my life. And one of the biggest things, it is so humbling to realize that I'm 33 years sober and I have a disease that can kill me. And if I believe wholeheartedly that I have this disease that can kill me if I drink again, that I have to live a different way of life in order to live, in order to stay sober so that I can live, then what am I willing to do? I'm going to tell you, earlier today, we got this person that keeps coming to our newcomer meeting and raises their hand first every time and shares first every time. And oh my God, it's annoying. It's annoying me. It's really annoying me. And here I know I'm going to come talk at the big, Phil's big Saturday night meeting. And I'm thinking, oh my God, and this makes me look so bad, that I'm annoyed by this newcomer. And I'm not the spiritual giant that I want you all to think I am. And I'm pissed off, Not only am I pissed off at her because I can't control her because, they're not listening to me. I even told some other chairperson, I reminded them that we don't have to call on people in order, hoping that they would, take the hint. But no, they're not. They're not doing it. They're calling on her. And this whole thing, and I was just like, you know what? I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I'm working with sponsees now. I've got, 6 amazing women that I'm working with. I'm going to write inventory And I did. I got out this notebook right here and I wrote inventory on this thing. And the whole time kind of hating it. But at the end it was, thank you, God, for giving me a chance to know you better by showing me what's in the way, and just back to the whole thing. If I believe I'm an alcoholic and I need to do this to live, what am I willing to do? Because that really is what's at the bottom of this. And I'm not immune. I get the daily reprieve. So what am I willing to do each day? And I really love the third set promises. It says, I have a new boss. I have a new employer. And if I perform his work well, he'll give me everything I need. And I'm going to tell you a little story. My husband and I were fighting one night, and I'm the type of person that, like, I'm a yeller, especially if you contradict yourself. Oh, just forget it. Okay. If you like say one thing and then do another or anything like that, or try to, I'm on you. I should have been a lawyer. Really. People have said that to me before, because I'll catch you. And then my husband, like, he'll walk away. He's not going for the yelling. He's not going to put up with it. He's going to leave the room. And he's also when we have a conflict, I want to talk it out right away and get it out of the way. Let's get it out of the way right now. But he needs to go think about it for a little while and then talk about it. Well, that makes me uncomfortable, because when I was growing up and people weren't talking about things, something bad could happen. Somebody could blow up. My mom once tried to throw a TV. Of course, it was one of those really big 80s TVs, so it just kind of landed. My stepdad once swept all the dinner off the table. I mean, we had some stuff happen, okay? So I get really uncomfortable and triggered, by this stuff. And so one night we'd been fighting and he had left the room and I was in here in my room, and I just was thinking, oh my God, what? He's making our lives miserable. He's not talking to me. He doesn't know how to talk. I'm so uncomfortable, and it's all his fault. It was all his fault. I'm telling you, it was all his fault. I was convinced it was his fault. Why did I even marry him? And I'm in here and I'm having the pity party, and I know it. I know I'm in self-pity, I mean, I'm sober now. Okay. I can see a lot of stuff that's going on. And then the other part of me thought, oh my God, all you do is complain. All you do is nag him. All you do is, you're not accepting of him. You're not being, this is what you did in your first marriage. You're ruining it. You're being triggered because of childhood issues, and you're trying to control everything so that you can be okay. This is all self-will. It's all self. It's all self. It's all self-centered. It's all self-centered. It was just like, and I could see it. And I was laying there and I was like so sick of myself, and I felt it again. I can't change. I can't change myself. Can't do it. And I just started crying. And I said, God, please help me. I don't know what to do. I can't stop being this way. And all of a sudden, from one moment to the next, everything changed. And I was all of a sudden saw my husband differently. He was a child of God who needed me. And the knowing that came was, be more patient, be more kind, be more loving, go help your husband. And in that moment, I felt I get goosebumps talking about it. It was so powerful. I felt the power of God's love flow through me, and I felt whole. I didn't need anything from my husband in that moment. I did not need anything from him. And before that, I needed everything. It was constant. I was needy for everybody to do what I wanted. And in that moment, I didn't need anything. And all I wanted to do was go to him and say, honey, what can I do for you? That is not natural for me as an alcoholic. And only until I ran out of my own options, did I finally get to a place. I was like, pray as a last resort, right? And I've realized that about myself in the last year, that has always been my MO, is pray as a last resort. Only when I run out of my own options do I ever ask God for help. And it's something that I have recognized and started to change in my life, where I ask for inspiration. And one of the places I have to, like I said earlier, working with newcomers. I have so often they come to me and they are asking me questions, or they need something, and it's become it's so cool how much the book says, if I start to ask, and I develop a relationship with my higher power, then I start to get inspired. I start to get answers, and it feels inspired. And that is so cool. And I get to work with these new women, and they ask me stuff. And first of all, it's so cool how the higher power puts you together with people. I mean, it kind of blows my mind sometimes when you start to talk, and you're like, oh my gosh, that sounds just like me, or, you know, the things we have in common. And I get to be a source of stability for them. Who ever thought I could be a source of stability for anyone? I'm telling you, it blows my mind, and I know it comes from a higher power. And I still don't have a definition of a higher power. I don't know who my God is. And I'm glad that AA doesn't require that I have a definition. It just requires that I choose to believe that God is everything. And I do. I can look at my life, you know, it's a choice I get to have. And the thing is, the choice gives me peace. And that's all I've ever wanted was peace. I've wanted to feel whole. I've wanted to feel connected. I've wanted to feel not alone. I wanted to feel a part of something. And look what we get to be a part of. I want to share one more story with you. I was, again, having trouble in my relationship. And I was walking and we were really having a hard time. It was early in our relationship. And I was at the grocery store, and it was one of those days. He was like, oh God, I have to buy groceries for the kids. I don't want to be out in public. I'm dragging myself around feeling like naked and emotionally just complete wreck. And I'm in the freezer section, and my phone rings, and it's this girl who I had spoken at a treatment center. I didn't sign up for it. Someone called me. You know, I wasn't active in AA. She called me and said, I can't speak tonight. Can you go do it for me? So I did. And this girl called me, and she said, I was only going to stay there on a 72-hour hold, but then I heard you talk, and something you said made me want to stay. And all of a sudden, it was like a sunbeam came down into the grocery. You know, I remember where exactly, I think in pictures, so I remember exactly where I was standing. And boy, did it tell, I mean, it was such a clear message of what actually matters, why you are here, what you're doing, you know. And I tell newcomers all the time, I tell new people, wait until someone tells you that because of something in your story, you saved their life. And it's actually true. It actually happens. You might not know it for years. I've had that happen to me more than once, where someone said, I heard you years and years ago, or you talked to me on the phone this one day. And just because I'm a drunk, I get to do that. Like, that's crazy. I'm really grateful that I know today that, you know, this is a new way of life. I think that I recently realized that because I learned the big book on a relationship, maybe I learned how to apply the steps to other things in life easier. I don't know. That was my experience. But it is something that I can use for anything. It says it in the 12 and 12 in the forward. These steps, spiritual in nature, practice as a way of life, enable the sufferer to become happily and usefully whole. And in that's all I ever wanted, was to become whole. And that's what it gave me. I believe in the three sides of the triangle. And for years I wasn't in all three sides. Now I am. I have a home group where I am fed spiritually and learn a lot. And that's a group out of California called Prime Time is now. I also go to a lot of newcomer meetings, and I do service in a newcomer meeting every day at 4 o'clock Eastern. It's international. We get a lot of day one people, a lot, every day. And it's awesome. I stay after and I talk to women in small breakout rooms. So we figured out how to, you know, do the meeting after the meeting thing. I love the big book. I'm not doing any big book things now except for my own work with my sponsor, just because I've had so much of it. But if you've never gone through, you know, one of those big book comes alive kind of line by line things, it's pretty neat. You know, my sponsor says we have to make it personal to us. I have to find myself in that book. I have to find myself in the problem so I can also find myself in the solution and believe that I need it and that it will work for me. Anyway, I love AA, and I'm really glad I'm still here. I really am. I don't take my seat for granted. And, you know, even though I used AA like a Band-Aid for many years, I'm really glad that I did put my sobriety. You know, I knew when I felt like things were, that I needed to go get help. Yeah. So there you go. I never know how to end, but I'm really glad to be here. And this is probably the biggest group I've ever talked in front of before. So I tried to not think about that when I was talking. So thanks a lot, Phil. Thank you for having me.